bring the February 5th meeting of the IBA to order.
Motion. Second.
A motion and second to approve the minutes from the October 2nd, 2024 and January 22nd, 2025 meetings if there are no changes or additions.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. The 2024 full board evaluation. Do we have those already, Lisa?
These are the compilation of the reports that you individually submitted that then Lisa will submit to the Authority Budget Office at the end of March.
Thank you, Lisa. At this moment, I'm going to ask for a motion in a second to change the agenda to move the pattern for progress presentation up to now.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, we wanted to get you in and out. We appreciate all the work that you've done on the City of Hudson Housing Pipeline Assessment. And we have the PowerPoint in front of us, and we have your report distributed yesterday. And the show is yours. And good morning.
Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I just want to say it's nice to be with you all because I feel like I've been living in Hudson lately. I feel like every weekend I coach the Saugerties travel basketball team. I feel like I've been in Hudson every other weekend for the entire winter. I don't know, Kamal, I thought I saw you coaching a younger team. Did I see you coaching a younger team last time I was there?
Yeah, I coached the team, I think, one younger than yours.
All right, there you go. So I saw Kamal coaching. We're all in the same basketball loop. So anyway, with that, I'm going to share my PowerPoint. It took me about 15-20 minutes to go through it. I'll try to go through it quickly, but I think there's some information in here that I think is just important to absorb and think about. As always, when I do these, I always like to reiterate, I'm not trying to get you guys to make any decision or take any action. You know, in true pattern form, all we're trying to do is help show some of the data and trends that perhaps will help you make informed decisions. So that's my only goal here. You guys know us by now. We are the region's nonprofit planning and research organization. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. Our goal is really, without political aims or affiliations, to really conduct studies about different topics in the region that affect the region, affect its residents, affect its communities, its cities, its villages, its towns, and try to provide that information to those places so they can make really well-informed decisions. Wow, over the past year, we've done that on a whole lot of topics. We put out the region's first and most definitive childcare study, lots of studies on housing, lots of studies on school buildings closing down and being reused. We have 48 school buildings that have closed in the region just in the past 20 years. This scourge of more people living in hotels, what to do with our old malls. And I'll just mention a couple things coming out that I think you all will be interested in. Tomorrow, we are releasing our new housing market report for 2024. I put the data in this presentation just to show you a little preview because some of it is very relevant to you all. We have an introduction to microtransit, which I think is very, very relevant for Columbia County. We have some reports coming out on demographic trends and the state's new wetlands regulations. So if any of those topics interest any of you, stay tuned, pay attention to our social media, get on our e-blast list. We have lots of stuff coming out this year that I think will be relevant to the city of Hudson and to Columbia County. So I just want to start, as I promised, this is the latest data, just came out this week. Little bit of a surprise, but not a huge surprise. Median home prices continue to go up across the region, the annualized median. So in Columbia County, year over year, you're up another $25,000. If you take out Rockland County, you guys now own the dubious distinction on a dollar basis of having the highest rise in median home prices of any of the 9 counties north of New York City. So when you talk about housing stress, when I talk across the region about the housing stress, I always say statistically, Columbia County has the worst housing stress in the region. It is true. especially on the ownership side, but, to some degree on the renter side as well. So these are the new data that just came out this week. We'll be publishing them in more detail tomorrow. Stay tuned if this interests you. I mentioned, of course, if homeownership is getting farther and farther out of reach for folks, that means we have a larger proportion of the middle class sort of squabbling and competing for a rentals in a rental market that has not seen a substantial increase in the number of rentals available. So I just want to underscore this for you all, right? In Columbia County and in most of the region, it's been the fact for the past 10 years that rent has outpaced wages by about double. So if rent went up 6, 7, 8%, wages went up 2 in a typical year. If rent went up 10%, wages went up 4. This has been what we've seen now for most of the past decade or more. And in Columbia County, right, similar, rent going up 9, wages going up 4. We're starting to see wages backslide. That's a consequence of two things. A lot of retirements, people, baby boomers going back into, fixed income and moving into rentals. It's also a consequence of a lot of our job growth right now in the region, not all of it, but a lot of it is in people who are making tip workers, essentially. So as you get a greater proportion of tip workers, you can see that wage, especially among renters, backslide. But a lot of this has to do with the growing body of retirements we have in our communities. And you can see increasingly here, 2010 to 2021, these are data we need to update soon. But certainly as a region, we are becoming proportionally a region of bigger increase in renters than homeowners. There's lots of reasons for that we could talk about someday, but that's a whole nother presentation. So the purpose of the report we put together, there were really 4 purposes. One was, what does affordable mean when relating to housing for the Hudson community? What kind of housing is required to sustain the city's workforce? And will the housing units that are currently in the development pipeline meet the needs of the people in Hudson? And also what gaps still exist. So that's what I'm going to try to attack and sort of illustrate here in these slides. Going to start with an analysis of housing need. So one of the things that happened during the pandemic, as you know, is the region and Columbia County in particular saw this significant migration of wealth come into the county from the New York City metro area. And as a consequence of that, it's particularly acute in Hudson, in Columbia County. We saw sort of a divergence of different wages. So since 2013, your median wage, so median being the 50-yard line and equal number of people above it and below it, has gone up by about $9,000. But your average wage has gone up by $43,000. This gets a little confusing, but the best way I can explain this to you is when the average moves away from the mean, that is an indication of a significant influx of wealth into your community and really not a greater proportion, but wealthy people making up a bigger amount of your total gross income in the community. So that's a significant sign for your community. Of course, then down here in the second chart, we always like to look at income quintiles just to understand, what wage movement looks like in a region. So lowest quintile, that's your lowest 20% of earners in the city of Hudson, then your 20 to 40%, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and then your top 20% of earners. And you can see here, you've actually had your lower quintiles see some better wage gains than much of the region, believe it or not. In most of the region, the lowest 2 quintiles have seen a 0% movement or a negative movement. That's the case in Orange County. That's the case in Ulster. That's the case in Sullivan. You've seen like some modest gains, but they're not enough to keep up with rent. And then you can see the way that the upper quintiles of income have seen big gains. Now, there's a consequence. The reason I'm pointing these things out is there's a policy consequence to this, okay? And the policy consequence, when the average or the median income, goes up by a lot, but your renter wages kind of stagnate, what you end up having this cascade where people fall out of the 80% of AMI bracket into the 50% of AMI bracket. And That was very evident in the data in the city of Hudson. You have a lot of households that a decade ago were making about 80% AMI that are now making about 56% of AMI on that same or similar wage because of the way that influx of wealth has really pushed up the county's AMI calculation very, very quickly. So as you're thinking about housing units, as you're thinking about housing policy, it's just important to understand the city has not seen an influx of more poor folks or more lower income folks. It has, however, as a consequence of that growth in wealth countywide, seen more people of modest middle income earnings drop into those brackets. So I just want to make sure I draw that distinction for you. It's an important one to be thinking about when you think about housing policy. So I just said this, more low-income people have not come into the city, but I want to show you what has happened. As a consequence of that drop, what you've seen here is you've actually seen the number of people making under 30% of AMI increase by about 210 households, okay? You've seen a little bit of a decline in that 30 to 50 because a lot of those people dropped the bracket, okay? And then you've seen that people drop from 80 to 100 into the 50 to 80. That's what you've seen is this cascade as a consequence of your AMI calculations going up. Now, I want to show you on this next slide in a minute some of why that happened. But when you have this happen, it's important then you start to have concerns about displacement if the housing stock is not built and not preserved, okay? You can see what's happening to your renters here, cost burdened, okay? Cost burdened renters, the number of cost burdened renters who are paying 30 to 50% of their income on housing has actually declined, but the number of severely cost burdened renters who are now paying more than 50% of their income on housing has increased by more than triple. So this is, again, a consequence of AMI calculations, the influx of wealth, and sort of one of the things you need to be thinking about as you're crafting that policy. Some of you may have seen me present this before, but when I again say that Columbia County has the worst housing stress of any of the 9 counties we study, it doesn't all have to do with this, but I want to illustrate to you what happened. So these are data from the IRS that we collect every year through some of our data sources at the IRS. This is just the heart of the pandemic here. And I wanted you to pay attention to 2020, 21, because this actually shapes a lot of your data. During the year 2020 to 2021, the average income for a household moving into your county was $166,000. The average income of households moving out of your county was $68,000. Now, I do not use this as a bad word, but that is gentrification at the speed of light. You had about 6% of your total population turnover in this pandemic migration. And that has a big consequence on housing prices. It has a consequence on public policy related to housing and how you design it. And I want to just be clear. We look back at 20 years of these AGI, adjusted gross income data. We have never seen a gap that big for any county in a single year anywhere in the Hudson Valley ever. Okay. So again, this stress is kind of a unique, very intense, very quick set stress. All right. Now, changes in the housing stock. This I found to be absolutely fascinating about the city of Hudson. You have actually seen an almost numerically equal increase in the number of single-family homes in your city, as you have seen a decrease in the number of duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes. That is very, very unusual, okay? Now, why has that happened? We don't know exactly, but we can make some educated inferences. It appears that a lot of your small-scale multifamily housing units have likely been converted to single-family homes. And that could be a consequence of people setting up short-term rentals, long-term rentals, wanting to buy on the relatively cheap a 2-family home that they converted into a single-family home for themselves. But that's a very important trend to see over the past 10 years is the number of small multifamily buildings that you have lost to single-family. Now, have you lost some of those to dilapidation? Probably not a huge number of them, but maybe a couple lost to dilapidation. On a net basis, as a consequence of that, the city over the past decade has only produced 33 new housing units. That is very, very low, okay? That is a severe underproduction of housing, and that's important. Now, what does that point to when we think about these things in the context of a housing pipeline? It really points to the idea that you need more housing of every typology for residents at every level of income. Is the need most acute at that lower level? Folks who are renters, folks who are working in your growing restaurant and hospitality industry? Absolutely. The need is most acute there. But new stock at those upper levels, okay, market rate units, single family homes, you need more there to prevent people from gobbling up more of your affordable housing and turning it into the type of housing they want. So again, when I talk to folks about housing, it's very important to understand right now in the region, in your city, in your county, you need more housing units for people across the full spectrum of income, not just in one segment or the other. Again, the needs might be most acute at that lower end, but the need and the demand exists across the full spectrum of housing typologies and housing cost, okay? So again, conversions, you're actually losing affordable stock when you see these data conversions to single family. Now, quickly in the pipeline, you have about nine projects that comprise the core of your housing development pipeline in Hudson. They represent about 420 total units, right? All of them except 37, according to the data we collected from the city, are rentals. So 37 for some form of ownership. Of those 420, 239 or 57% of them are set aside to be affordable for households making 50% of AMI or less. Guess what? That's pretty darn good. I can tell you proportionally, that is better than most pipelines that we look at across the region, okay? Most pipelines, they're pretty happy if they're, 20, 25, maybe 30%. But this is an indication you've got a pretty good pipeline if you're looking to serve your full-time residents who are cost burdened and would like to get into a unit that lifts them out of being cost burdened and fits better with their budget. This is a pretty good pipeline in terms of its proportional affordability. Now, I do want to also note, it doesn't solve all your problems, right? Could you use more housing than 420? Yeah. Could you use maybe some additional opportunities for ownership? Sure. But listen, the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? You have a pretty darn good pipeline. You just want to make sure you're sort of tending to it. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But pretty robust pipeline. The affordability, proportionally speaking, is pretty impressive. So here you see, right, this is 2021, right? These are the number of people who are cost burdened at the different levels of AMI. This is where your units are landing at the different levels of AMI. So you can see again, this shows your units here, 106, as I say, 239 of them on landing 50 or below. That's helping your folks who are in most need of a unit that is more affordable on their budget. Who are you building for, right? Always good to think about who we're building for, okay? On the left, I'm going to explain this because the chart on the right, I think, is actually one of the more important charts patterns ever made in my time here. But on the left, you've got, these are all your households, okay? The vast majority of your households in Hudson are single people, okay? Followed by two-person household, and then 3 and 4 sort of bring up the tail end there. Okay, you have proportionally a lot of single parents in your city. Okay, 10% of all your households made up of single parents. Okay, important to be thinking about when you're thinking about affordability based on two-person household AMIs. Okay, important thing just to keep in mind. Now, this chart on the right is really interesting. What we did here is we took all of your industry sectors that have jobs in the city, broken down by the number of jobs that exist in the city on the right, and then we interspersed the amount of income that would be needed to afford different units of housing at different levels of AMI. So, for example, in the retail trade, if you're making here 45,000, you can't statistically, okay, according to the affordability metric that you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your income on your housing costs, you cannot afford any of the housing that is above you, okay? So you cannot afford an 80% AMI apartment for one person in Hudson, okay? You cannot afford, the median rent. Okay, if you're working in retail, you can afford a 50% AMI because that's below you. Okay, so again, looking where's most of your jobs growing right now, it's in accommodation and food services. Okay, they can't afford anything that's above them in yellow in terms of housing units. Statistically speaking, could they cobble together the money to afford it and pay 55% of their income? Yeah, they could do that. It's not going to leave them a lot of money at the end of the day to participate in the economy in other ways you'd like them to, or afford other essential items. So just important to see that where your jobs line up to the different levels of affordability. Now, this just want to mention again, right? We worked with Department of Labor on this analysis for you. This is your job growth over the past 6 or 7 years. So you can see, kind of interesting, you guys have lost a lot of healthcare and social assistance jobs in the city. That defies the regional trend a little bit, although we have seen a lot of healthcare jobs in the region come out of the small cities and retrench to the sort of towns that surround those cities. That's something we have seen in the region. City of Kingston lost 1,000 healthcare jobs to the town that surrounds it over the past decade, as an example. But your biggest growth, right? Accommodation and food service, 35% job growth, right? Going down, retail trade, 47% job growth. So just want to point out, the industries that are growing most in your city are the ones that tend to need more of the affordable housing at those lower levels of affordability. Important thing just to see and understand as you're thinking about policy, okay? Current trends, yeah, exacerbate that housing cost burden. Okay, last couple slides and then I'll be done. Couple takeaways. You've got a pretty robust housing pipeline, so that's a good thing. 57% of your units being affordable to cost burden households, that's a good thing. Severe underproduction, multifamily conversions, regional migration, all those things point toward the need for more housing across all typologies and all income levels. They're also just things you should be watching and paying attention to, because it shifts the housing stock that's available versus the housing stock that's in demand, right? So we want to make sure you're producing a good diverse housing stock, again, focusing where the most acute need is, but understanding the need is across the full spectrum. Rising AMI and stagnant renter wages has pushed people into that very low income level. Again, not to repeat myself, but someone who was at 80% of AMI 10 years ago, we did the numbers, they're hanging out around 54% of AMI now, so just understand that. Cost burden has grown in the below 50% AMI range, okay? Number of units to meet the demand there has shrunk though, due to those conversions from multifamily homes into single family homes. I want to end with two things. Pardon my voice. I've been on Zoom since 7 a.m., so I apologize. I'm getting a little hoarse. One of the things I want to underscore for you as you think about, all the various decisions you have to make is beware of the stress in the development and finance sector, okay? Developers across the region right now, I know this from running our Center for Housing Solutions, from being on the Governor's Council, from helping to run the Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund that funded housing, they are having a very, very difficult time putting together a capital stack to get these projects funded and get them in the ground. That stress is being driven by a bunch of stuff. The high cost of land, the high cost of construction materials, taxes, labor, insurance costs have been a major, thing that's come up that's really befuddling developers. I'll just mention construction materials, HVAC materials have gone up like 80% in 4 or 5 years. So we have a couple projects we funded in the Mid-Hudson through the Governor's Council that were fully funded. 2 years went by and all of a sudden they had a $1.2 million gap. Most of it was due to HVAC inflation. Shortage of labor to build the homes, sort of anti-development sentiments that are still lingering around the region. despite the fact that we are demonstrably in a housing crisis, we've only built 0.45 units of housing for every job we've attracted to the region. There's lots of other data that show this. And those capital gaps are significant. On the typical development, they're hanging out around 15%. Now, on this capitalization of housing, in the region right now, when we go around and talk to nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, talk to HCR, talk to all the groups we talk to, there's a couple general sentiments. Number one is most developers are not able to build right now unless they get two out of what's considered the big four. Those are low-income housing tax credits, brownfield tax credits, historic tax credits, or the Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund, which you guys aren't even eligible for in Columbia County. Most developers are telling us if they can't get two out of those four, they really can't put together a capital stack. Banks had slowed down lending on certain types of housing because they had too much commercial exposure on their books. That was a big thing we saw happening over the past few years. In response to that, we've seen county level housing funds pop up in 5 of the counties that pattern covers. So in Dutchess, in Rockland, in Sullivan, Ulster, and Westchester, they have either created housing revolving loan funds, or in the case of Ulster and Sullivan, and soon Dutchess, they're moving in that direction, housing trust funds that actually have an annual revenue source to make annual expenditures toward helping to capitalize housing projects with different rules attached. We've seen the state come out with the local option tax incentives where if you're a city, if you're a town, you can do a local resolution to allow 421P and 421PP, which phases in the taxes for housing developments that have certain levels of affordability over a period of time. Again, one of the things that's very difficult is it's difficult to build at that level of affordability if you don't have some predictability in the way you're going to phase the taxes in. We have seen IDAs increasingly get involved in funding and inducing housing. In fact, the Orange County IDA is going to vote next week to include housing in its UTEP at the 80 and 60% AMI affordability levels. If you told me that was the case 4 years ago, I would have thought you were on some sort of silly juice. They are doing it next week. Why are they doing it next week? Because they understand that more housing, better housing, is a precursor to any hopes they might have on job attraction, retention, and growth efforts. And down that way, where they're very aggressive at talking with site selectors, they are getting the same question over and over again. Dutchess is getting it. Orange is getting it. You guys may be getting it. And a lot of them call me when they get this question. They have some sort of job, some sort of a company on the hook that wants to come to the county, and they get a call from the company. Are you sure we're going to be able to find 100 employees? Or are we going to be able to find housing for 80 employees? And they immediately pick up the phone and call me. And my answer is always, you're calling me because you know the answer to the question. You just don't want to be the one to give it. The answer is no. So a lot of our economic development efforts are sort of stalling out on the housing front. And so that's why a lot of the IDAs are getting involved. All these efforts, whether it's the county level funds, the local option buy-in, tax credit, tax incentives, the IDAs, some of the other things that are going on across the region, they have common goals. Help bridge the capital gap and reduce that initial tax burden for the affordable units, right? So it can be phased in so that that level of affordability can be achieved to sustain the workforce that we have. I don't have it in this presentation, but there's ample evidence to show that regionally and locally our workforce is shrinking. Last thing I want to show you really quick is this. These are new data that are going to be published soon in a report we're putting out. The growth in work from home is stunning, okay? 6-7 years ago in this region, we had about 59,000 people working from home. We now have 174,690 people working from home. In Columbia County, 15.7% of all your working people are now working from home. That's up from 6.5%, okay? I don't have any great message here or context to share. We're just working on these data now. We just collected them and got them for the first time the other day. But it is really, really an interesting thing to think about in the context of zoning, in the context of community design, in the context of people just being in different locations during the day than they traditionally were. And so important for you all just to, have a beat on some of these trends and be paying attention to the way that your communities are changing and developing. I'm going to shut up now. And if anyone has any questions, I will do my best to answer them. And if I don't have an answer, I'll tell you that too.
Open it up for questions from the committee.
I have one, and this may be in the bigger document that we were sent. Didn't get the chance to go through it all. Are the individual project details that make up the housing pipeline numbers in that document? And if not, could they be made available, please?
Yes, they're attached to the document in the form of a memo from Michelle, who I see is on the Zoom.
I can figure it out, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, so Margaret Morris here. I've been in Hudson for about 15 years. And I find the data very interesting because anecdotally, I have seen shifts in my own little neighborhood, particularly with loss of middle class people. And the pandemic was very much part of that. And the quintile data is always very interesting because I think increasingly we have a community that's made up of low income and then very, very wealthy. I thought the top quintile data was fascinating. On the work from home front, so you had a slide here with various industries. This is on page 12, slide 12 of your presentation, where you're talking about jobs in the city. What is your source of data there for jobs in the city? Because I think some of these might be work from home jobs.
Sure. So these are actual jobs located in the city. This is New York State Department of Labor has, you'll have to forgive me, I forget the data set, but I made a special data request to the State Department of Labor, not for jobs located in the city. So those are going to be, whether it's tax data or whatever their ultimate source of data, those are going to be actual jobs located in the city. I will draw a distinction. Those are not jobs that people may be living in Hudson and going outside of Hudson to work in and bringing money back to Hudson. These are actual jobs physically located in the city of Hudson.
Right, but if somebody is working if they migrate up to Columbia County or to Hudson, and they are working in, say, professional and technical, they're not going out of Hudson to do that job, they're doing it from home. Would they be in here as jobs in the city?
I don't believe so, but I will take that question back to DOL and ask. I think they can see on like W-2s the location of the job by zip code, and that's one of the data feeds into this. So I don't think that's the case, because otherwise, for example, like if you look, the number of finance and insurance jobs in the city is pretty low. You'd probably expect to see those be higher, but that's just going to be, your typical bank jobs, insurance brokers. That seems to be at a scale that's right for the city. So I will double check on that question for you.
Well, if it's coming from the W-2, that's relevant. I myself was working from home throughout the time that I have lived here, and my employer is listed in Long Island.
Yep. Got
it. The other thing that struck me as I was going through this, and the conversions, by the way, of multifamily to single, I've seen that quite a bit in the area where I live. One of the things that strikes me is that we are very confined, limited to square miles. There's a limit to how much we can do in terms of housing. And I think that trying to think about this in terms of housing in the broader area. So for example, Greenport would be certainly accessible for somebody working in Hudson, or Stockville, Columbiaville. I think we were to think a little bit broader than just saying we must build X number of units within the city of Hudson, because not everybody needs to walk to work. And so I think that's a conversation that we need to start thinking about. How do we expand development of housing in the neighboring communities as well? Because there is a lot more land around Hudson. And within Hudson, we are constrained physically by just the size of the city. And so, historically also, we had these houses, 19th century houses that were originally built as large one-family houses. They went through a period of multifamily. Now they're converting back to single family. But it's not as if we have space where we can build more single family or duplexes.
Yeah, there's a whole, I mean, coming off understanding your data, there's a whole host of strategies that you could pursue as a city, with your neighbor towns. The other thing, and I won't pretend to know specifically in your city, but we're doing a comp plan for a city that's much larger than yours, but sort of economically a similar, contextually a similar city. And when we looked around with them, we found a lot of opportunities for adaptive reuse that could be good for adding new housing stock or infill. And sometimes it takes a set of eyes, some imagination, but you can find the opportunities. Then it's just a matter of how do you get those parcels or those buildings into the hands of someone who has the ability to do something with them. But I don't disagree with what you said. I think, taking a holistic look inside the city boundary and outside is a sensible thing to do.
You mentioned the county level housing funds in Dutchess, Rockland, Sutherland, Ulster, Westchester. How effective have they been in helping to spur new housing?
That's a really great question. So here's the thing. There's not a great answer yet, and I'll explain why. They're all kind of Lewis and Clark at the same time. In other words, this is something new, and all the places that are doing it set out to do it simultaneously, more or less. So most of these funds have just made their first awards in the past year or two. And generally those awards account for 10 to 15% of the total project cost. And the projects that got those awards are currently under construction. So Ulster County, through its Housing Trust Fund, just made a series of awards to, let's say, 5 or 6 projects. They're under construction now. Westchester's been at it for a little bit longer. Dutchess County made the awards, I think, last year, and about half of their projects are under construction. So are they helping to complete the capital stack for these projects? Absolutely. Yeah, they are. The question I think that's important is, what I always say to people is the reason we have to act like we're in a crisis is that any action we take now really takes 3 to 4 years to get in the ground as an actual housing unit that you can then go rent or sell to someone. So they've taken this action in really mostly 23 and 24. And you expect to see some of those units potentially come online by the end of this year. I don't know if that answers your question, but it helped enough that those things are actually being built now.
Adam, can I ask, how do those counties fund their housing trust funds, both in the initial setup and ongoing income?
Yeah, great question. So most of them used ARPA funding to seed the fund. For those that are a revolving loan fund, in some cases, the ARPA funding was the total revenue that went into the revolving loan fund. And just to be clear, there's essentially 2 different models happening in the region right now. There's a revolving loan fund where they're sending the money out, low or no interest, and then getting it back over time. You can imagine that has I don't want to say it has less of an impact, but the impact is slower in the sense that you send the money out, you got to wait for it to come back so you can send it out again, right? So that's a little bit of a slower or lesser. And then there's Ulster County, which is sort of a true trust fund, where they went out, their hotel motel bed tax was 2% lower than all the counties that surrounded them. So they went out and got the legislation out of Albany to increase it by 2% and assigned that increase to the trust fund. So that essentially every year that 2% is coming in as a source of revenue and then going out to help capitalize the construction of housing. In Sullivan County, we're building their trust fund right now. We'll be done with it by the end of the year. There, they put $2 million in as seed from fund balance they had. And what they're looking to do is, it's common knowledge that this year, it looks like the state is going to pass the first ever sales tax on short-term rentals. And what we're suggesting they might do is pretend that they never saw that new sales tax money, pretend it didn't exist. stick it in the trust fund and use that as your revenue source to send out to help capitalize housing projects. And it makes sense thematically too, because if short-term rentals, worsen our housing stress, take housing off the market that could be used for full-time people, then the revenue we get from that should be used to help capitalize housing that is for our full-time residents. So sort of if you want to think of it thematically, it makes sense. But those are the major models across the region. Again, everyone's sort of venturing out into this world at the same time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right,
Adam, thank you very, very much. We appreciate your work and the work of your team. It's a very thorough report and we're very grateful to you.
You're welcome. Hey, everybody have a great 2025 and a good rest of the week. See you.
thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Come on, I'll see you at the basketball court. Bye.
All right. All right, so now, I'll ask for a motion in a second to accept and vote on the retainer to retain our attorney, Chris Shea.
Motion.
Second.
Do we need a roll call vote or is all in favor? Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We want to pause the meeting now for finance committee.
Sure.
All right. All yours.
Right. Can I have a motion to open the finance committee?
Make motion.
Are you on the finance committee?
I'll nominate one of them.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate them. I
Second to me,
appreciate you.
second to me, Mark.
I think it's you too.
Okay, motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye. The packet is one of the 3 white packets in front of you. It says finance committee agenda right there.
This finance committee is Heather, Dominic, and Margaret.
Okay.
Okay, can I have a motion and a second to accept the meetings from the prior finance meeting?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, you'll see attached is the review of the finance committee performance. Does anybody have any comments or statements on that? Everything is agreed with, one somewhat agree in terms of reviewing and approving this charter. Seems reasonable. Do I have to make a motion to accept that, or is that just a review thing? Can I have a motion and a second to
Motion.
accept the confidential board evaluation of the HIDA finance committee, please?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The next thing in attachment is the CDT contract to continue to provide administrative services to IDA. There's no increase in the fee from the prior year. It's an annual fee of $12,500 plus 10% of project costs up to a $10,000 limit. May I have a motion and a second to accept the contract and bring it forward to the full board for approval? Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Suggested investments, we spoke about this last meeting, which was only 2 weeks ago. I have reached out to our bank and asked them for a list of current investment options, both short-term and long-term, as well as any other things that they might consider, understanding that we are obviously a municipal entity, so we're not looking at anything that will involve risk. They have not provided that to me yet, but I expect to have that by next meeting. And I think that's it for us. So, does anybody in the public have any comments? Okay. Having no public comments, may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the finance meeting?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
All
You may
right,
return.
welcome back. Have a motion and a second to restart, to continue the regular meeting.
Motion.
Here, we'll turn it over to the administrative director's report.
Good morning, thank you. We have been in contact with KNR with respect to Providence Hall and Skylar Court. They are moving forward towards the closing. One of the things that may result in their attempting to close this month is so that project is owned by a not-for-profit at the point in time where the taxable status date would trigger an assessment for 2020.
So it's still owned by, The current,
No, they own it, but they haven't put it, rather, K&R bought it, but it's.
so KR does own it.
But until they get the HUD approvals, they can't put it into the not-for-profit. They're gonna transfer it. They bought it to keep, so it didn't go out of,
Right, understood.
but they're gonna transfer it to a not-for-profit.
Okay, but in this window of time,
If they don't do it by February 28th, it'll hit the taxable status date, right? That'll establish their assessment for 2025, 26.
presumably, but there would also presumably be a prorated tax bill for this year. So, okay,
That's what, I know the attorney brought that to their attention. And how it would impact the pilot that we approved, that the board approved previously. I think you and I should talk with Chris about it. The Depot District, we did receive, and DJH presented their report and analysis. Dan Kent, from the developer, is here. He also made a presentation at the last meeting. And I think it was my understanding that the board wanted to receive this report that we received today from Pattern for Progress and absorb that. So Dan, we appreciate you being here, but unless any of the agency members have questions, I think we probably have more of a discussion on your project at the next meeting.
Michael, could I just ask that we have Dan provide you with the version of the presentation that was made online?
Should be on.
Not the BAJH one, but didn't he also make a presentation?
Yeah, we have those PowerPoints. They should be online, and if they're not, we'll get them online.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the Casetta Group at 601 Union Street, the former Elks Club. I did have a call about 2 weeks ago from the new development team. It's the same owner, but they have new people driving the effort. I would expect we will have an application from them before the March meeting, and if not by the April meeting. And as you know, they have finalized their planning board and zoning board and historic preservation requirements. And as you know, we generally don't approve a project until those issues are resolved. Next up is the Crescent redevelopment project at 750 to 752 Warren Street. They have submitted an application. They're going to make a brief presentation shortly. They provided us with a PowerPoint deck describing the project. We've included in your packet for your review and discussion the analysis that Jessica Gabriel and I worked on with respect to the benefits, the cost of the incentives to the city, county, and school district, and the benefits that would result from the project that would mitigate those costs. That's not for approval. There's nothing for, the only thing we're going to request for approval is a resolution that was in your packet that Chris prepared, authorizing a public hearing. And Chris, would you like to explain that process before they make their presentation? Because of the deviation.
So the application includes the standard requests for financial assistance regarding the mortgage tax, sales tax, and so forth. But the pilot being proposed, although initially it is modeled on the type 3, the applicant is requesting a fixed pilot payment. The model in your UTEP is a percentage-based schedule, so that constitutes a deviation from your UTEP. So you would be required to go through the notice to taxing jurisdictions as part of your public hearing process. So the resolution would establish the proposed application details and then authorize Mike to proceed with, scheduling the public hearing and preparing the associated documents based on the application.
So it's not an approval of the project, it's just to begin, authorize the, accepting the application and beginning the process of setting a public hearing to respond to the developer's application. And then for the board to take into account, any public comment that is received, in whether or not to approve or, the project or not.
And again, I would just note that if the board does proceed to approve the application, you should require the applicant to place escrow for the preparation of those documents.
So if there are no questions on the procedural aspect of what is before the agency, we could ask Chris Perry and Sophie Henderson to make their presentations based on their application.
So just to state what I think is the obvious, by authorizing the resolution does not mean that we are tacitly or in any other way authorizing the type of schedule. It's just to get it on the docket and then to discuss.
And to get the feedback from the taxing jurisdictions and the public, so that you can decide whether you want to modify that schedule or not.
For all the people that should.
Have we had the similar analysis that we received from the Calban?
Then we'll have that before then, we'll have that next week.
So that will,
Jessica's working on it. I think we wanted to see this report first.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Welcome. Both of you, please come up.
I have, it's the same PDF that you guys have a packet of. My name is Chris Perry, for those of you that don't know me. I've been working on the redevelopment of the former Crescent building. Was Ackerman's before, if you guys aren't familiar with the location at 8th and Warren Street. We were really interested to create a development that looked at some of the city's problems, which is housing and jobs, and to do a development that supported the creative community in Hudson. So we're looking at creating 3 apartments on the 2nd floor, creating office space that will house a film production studio, creating a gallery space that will partner with regional colleges and arts organizations to put on exhibitions, and then to develop a rooftop event space. Our team is built up of all local people. On the owner side, it's myself, Ian Haig is a capital investor, and Daniel McCabe, a filmmaker, central part of bringing the film industry into the building. Because of the upstate tax credits, that's an industry that there's an opportunity to lure into Hudson. As you guys know, bringing new career level jobs to Hudson is really challenging, where we see a lot of service industry jobs that have a hard time supporting other costs. Other partners, local Tim Schroeder of Ingenuity Engineering out of Chatham is our structural engineer, CJ Bruce, Conflux out of Troy, Josh Payne, an architect out of Tivoli, Sophie Henderson and Rebecca Johnson from Black Diamond bookkeeping, and we're looking at Rondak Construction as our contractor out of Germantown. So a lot of jobs just in the development of the building, all locally. We've done a lot of work to make the building net zero. So no fossil fuels burned in the use of the building. Solar production on the roof and in an offsite property. And then what we did is really make a hyper efficient building envelope by replacing all the windows and doors, insulating the building, and a kind of state of the art HVAC system using heat pumps. The location of the building at the top end of Warren Street, we see as this kind of really essential tie of these green energy developments that you have with Basilica Hudson, the Red Barn, Kite's Nest, and the upper end of Warren Street, kind of tying the city together in this new way of looking at making hyper efficient redevelopment of old historic buildings. I talked about the mission a little bit. So, again, housing, job creation, and supporting the creative community in Hudson. That rooftop event space will drive an events industry supporting farmers, caterers, event planners, photographers, but it'll also work hand in hand with the film production studio. We'll be doing film screenings and production events and fundraisers, as well as the gallery space that'll utilize that space. And our hope is to program that event space as much as possible when we're not capitalizing on the events market to bring community programming through. Smuggler Films is that production company that will be moving into the office space. They're looking at bringing 15 career level jobs, and they currently have offices in New York, London, and Los Angeles. They're a major production company, and we're really fortunate to have them interested in the space. And the gallery space, which will work with the rooftop space, we will create a nonprofit that will run that space. And we're really interested in having an interaction with the gallery space that promotes the community of Hudson. So doing things like talkbacks and tours with schools and things like that, so that we have this opportunity to bring high-level arts programming, but make sure that that programming benefits the local community. Our project timeline, we've been working on this since 2022 and are very excited to be breaking ground in the coming weeks. About 2 years of construction. Construction commencing in the fall of 26, with a public opening in 27. The project budget for construction alone is about $11.6 million, with the total budget around $14.7 million when you include the pre-development and the property acquisition. Our stack includes grants, fundings. We're looking at the tax subsidies through the IDA and a huge capital investment by Ian Hague, our partner. The IDA pilot is crucial to making this work, and we'll be carrying a bank loan to pay for the construction. So those property tax credits during that payback period are essential to making our stack work. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
One quick note just on the project timeline. The work that's beginning shortly is just site preparation. So by the time the IDA has had a chance to make its decision, principal construction would begin until after that. Just
Questions from the committee? Chris?
I'm assuming because of the nature of the event space and the apartments that it's going to be fully ADA compatible with an elevator and access to all public spaces.
Yeah, and a big challenge to that building, it had an elevator in the building when it was built in 1916. It was a car dealership, and they had their showroom on the ground floor, stored cars in the basement, and did the service on the second floor. So there was this beautiful old elevator that was in operation that the previous owners broke when they were doing some construction. And so there's this existing elevator shaft that we were hoping would be able to be utilized, but a lot of work in this building to bring it up to ADA compliance, and the elevator shaft will be a new elevator shaft closer to the front of the building so that all spaces are accessible.
Great, thank you.
Now, Smuggler Films have looked at some of your projects. They have quite an extensive list of projects. When you talk about the 30 jobs that you're going to create, can we speak to that a little bit, that they would create?
Yes, so they'll be ramping up, and they're really interested in taking advantage of the upstate tax credits. That can be up to 40% credit on their production, so that's huge. The owners are, one of them is in Ghent, I believe, and the other has a house in Woodstock. So they're local to this area. They're also really interested in having their work. They have families that want to be in the area. So they're going to have production teams. And actually, there's a really cool opportunity to work with Tony Stone and their River House location, where they have some post-production facilities that are finally up and running. But basically, they'll be doing some editing and project management, client relations.
But they'll be rotating, they'll be jobs, project-based jobs, or full-time.
Full-time employees, yeah.
Are they, do you anticipate those being new employees to the firm, or are they going to be?
Yes, they'll
current
bring,
workers that are relocating?
some people, but mostly new hires. So they'll have, I think, probably an upper management team and then be bringing new jobs there. So it'll be a mix. And exactly what we can get out of them is, we don't have a space built yet. They're very interested. They want to be here. They want to be in Hudson. They want to be in the building. And until we have that space to house them, we can only get so much out of them. But we're really confident because of these upstate tax credits.
We should be doing both union and non-union jobs.
I believe non-union.
And the apartments would be market rate, I presume?
Market rate, what we were really hoping for was sub-market rate to support artists in the community, because they're, designed as these live workspaces, but the cost of construction is just so insanely high. And we were not able to find subsidies to, support sub-market rate housing. It was a goal that, we were very passionate about, but bringing jobs, creating housing, creating art space, there's only so much that is possible.
And some of the tax credits that Adam talked about and that you're all familiar with need a higher number of units to be pursued.
So you're talking about having 3 apartments in the
3
building?
apartments, yeah.
At what size are those apartments?
So the whole building is 6,000 square feet per floor.
Yeah.
So I believe the bigger unit's like 22, and then there's a small one that's 900, and then the other one is the balance of that. There's egress and staircases that get cut out at the elevator. So.
Thank you both. Very exciting project.
One question, could you just touch base on the grants that you have received and have applied for?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to early on receive a Restore New York grant.
Working with the city. Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
And what dollar amount?
That was 1.3 million. Our initial plan was to pursue historic tax credits. We spent 9 months working with SHPO, the state of New York, to create a design that met their needs. And upon approval from the state, it went to the Fed, and they weren't okay with our rooftop addition on the 2-story building. It was a very frustrating process to pursue those tax credits and ultimately not receive them, especially when we had support from the state. So we're not going for historic tax credits. The event space is a crucial income to support the cost of the development, so we had to walk away from it. From there, we pursued a NYSERDA net zero grant, and unfortunately, we did not receive that. But what that did do is it really pushed our design into a net zero design, hyper efficient. It's more capital investment up front, but we'll be maintaining that design because it keeps our overall operating costs lower in the long run, and we have done so much work to do that design already. We applied for a REAP grant, which will support the solar, a New York Main Street grant through National Grid. We've met with them and I'm very confident in that grant, and also an additional grant from Empire State Development, which is a capital grant.
Thank you. Before you consider the resolution to hold a public hearing, if you do take the top, the packet of 11 by 17. And I apologize for the size, but you can't read it on a 8.5 by 11.
What are we looking for?
Just want to give, so when you take this home, you'll know what you're looking
I
at.
have many,
The top page, the top page.
they're all
It's
separate.
called draft, they all say draft?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's tax exemption analysis, up in the
Okay.
far right corner.
Looks like this, has a yellow.
Yeah. This is the analysis that we've been doing for projects for the IDA for several years. It's been refined. Column A, this sheet primarily points out that it's a $14.8 million investment in the upper left-hand corner. There's a project summary. There's the total project investment. Then the estimated exemption. There's we included $10 million mortgage. They say they may not go that high, but we didn't want to be in a position where if they needed to go higher, that we couldn't give them the benefit because they hadn't asked for it in the beginning. That would result in at 1.25% mortgage recording tax exemption and $125,000 benefit. The principal benefit is the $8.7 million of construction, and the exemption on the sales tax would be $696,000. The four columns lettered A, B, C, and D is how we calculate the estimated benefit to the developer on the pilot. Column A is the current $980,000 assessment for a vacant building sitting on Warren Street. And over the 11 years, we went to the 11th year because you then have the project at full tax in year 11 when you look at the exemption. There would be $298,000 in taxes. If they proceeded with the project without the support of the IDA, in column B is the amount of taxes with no IDA benefit, and you can see that would be $838,000.
Where did the estimated assessment come from?
The estimated assessment came from the material that was submitted by the developer that we can share with you, showing the 10-year net present value of their operating budget, which is assessments on real property, commercial property, as you know, are based on the income approach, not the cost approach. And so, as we've done with all of the other projects, we have a 10-year cash flow analysis, and you take the net present value of that to come up with the assessed value.
Thank you.
And column C is the project with no real property tax pilot. And that was just really to give you a sense of what the benefits were for the mortgage tax and sales tax recording, sales tax exemption, which is $821,000, and a prorated IDA fees. But they're not asking for that. That was just to give you an idea of what it would be if they were only getting the mortgage tax and the sales tax.
So that's pulling down from the box at the top left.
Yeah. D is our uniform pilot policy, which is fashioned after 485B of the real property tax law, which for this project would be 50% discount in year 1 down to a 0 exemption at the end of in year 11. Using the assessed value and the current tax rates and increasing the current tax rates to 2%, you will see that the total tax pilot under the pilot, it's not a tax, the total pilot payment in lieu of a tax is $636,000, resulting in a $200,000 benefit between column B and column D. Added to that in the box at the bottom of column D includes the mortgage recording tax and the sales tax, with the net estimated value of the exemptions being $1,022,000. Not calculated into that because the money goes to the IDA, not the city, is $147,000 IDA fee. That comes out to about 8% of the value of the project.
I'm sorry, I thought that, I must have misunderstood, because I thought that you said in this resolution, it was a pilot schedule that varied.
Right, the fixed.
That's what
That's what
what
they're
our
asking.
policy is, and they've requested that it be fixed.
Right, so in other words, Heather, it would not be a percentage in the pilot agreement, it wouldn't say this year you pay 50%. It would say this year you pay $10,000 or whatever the number is, right? So they're asking for a fixed schedule, and therefore that's a deviation from the way that your pilot UTEP is structured.
Okay, even though the tax payments themselves match.
They
the
would,
UTEP
they
schedule.
would, right, theoretically, but then if the assessment goes up over time differently than what your projections are, then you would still have a fixed level of payment, right?
And that's what the IDA did with SEC 7 and with Pocketbook Factory, and initially with 620U. The second page, we need to come back to at another meeting. This was, and I'm sorry, my second page is the chart that says at the top, project evaluation criteria. Let's review that and come back to it. That's when we hired the attorney from the Albany Law School. And that goes, Margaret, to some of your concerns and interests in community benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Which we're continuing to work on. So then if you go to the last.
Labeling these with numbers.
Yeah, well, we just printed them as you arrived.
That's okay. That's fine.
The final one is, again, columns. With a green chart graph up at the top of the left-hand, or the right-hand corner. So what analysis here is, in the far left-hand corner, we take the estimated financial assistance requested. And you can see it's the 8.7 million in sales tax, which is divided 50-50 between the state and the region. And you then can see how that sales tax is divided between the county and the city. And I don't know why she does, I don't know why she doesn't have the school district there. The mortgage reporting tax is 125,000. Mortgage recording tax, 50% goes to the state, 50% to the county, and the county splits 50% of that with the municipality, which is 25% of the sales tax exemption, or the mortgage tax exemption. And then the real property tax exemption comes from the previous chart. If you go over and that's the project with no IDA benefit, then you go over and you look at the requested UTAP benefit. You can see that the county, the city gets about 13% of the total tax, or 13% of what the county gets. So the county would be getting the 348,000, and the city would be getting, or it's 6% of what the county gets. So it's
13.7.
13.7. So she has went through and amended this.
Well, she might have been doing it off the total,
Yeah, she did it off the total.
so that
It is, yeah.
it would be the same then.
Yeah. She did it off the total. So the city's giving up $45,000 in sales tax, $25,000 in mortgage recording tax, and as we said, 200,000, 192 in this model, in real property tax benefit. So when you factor that all in, and then you look at what the projected benefits are, the one-time IDA fee, which he does credit to the city, but again, the city is, the money goes to the IDA itself. The 11 years of property tax revenue under the pilot, and the estimated payroll benefits that would result from the jobs in the project, and there's no lodging tax here. So when they compare what they've asked for to what the benefits are, there's a total ratio of 4.52 for the county. Assuming all of the assumptions for the value of the exemptions and the value of the benefits would be a 1.9 ratio, 7% ratio for the city, and a 3.16 benefit ratio for the school district. And that's all based on the fact that right now it's an empty building assessed to just under $1 million. And what's not in here is, you may recall in previous analysis where financial assistance was evaluated, they added a whole host of soft benefits, including the sales tax on the, like previously mentioned, a cup of coffee that the construction worker might get on the food truck.
So, on the right-hand side here, under D,
Right.
a couple of rows up from the bottom, the 131, 242, that is the cost to the city of the benefits. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. And I think what we found with the city, because you're getting 25% of the mortgage recording tax, and you're getting 6% of the total sales tax, what you're really giving up as a benefit is the pilot agreement. Because that's where the $200,000 value is. The county and the state are giving up 75%, or they're giving up 94% of the sales tax. And that's the biggest number in terms of the benefit that goes to the developer. So basically the county and the state are putting the most money into the incentive package. And that's why when you look at the fact that the city's getting such a small percentage of the mortgage recording tax and the sales tax, that their number is higher than the other entities. And when we've looked at hotels and you add the 4% bed tax to it, if this was a hotel, it would probably be in the 10 to 1 benefit ratio. So I'm happy to go through this with any of you individually or at the next meeting, but I didn't want you to not know what you had in front of you.
And this you're going to go through the future meeting?
Yeah.
And what's this last one?
The last one
It's a summary.
is just a summary report.
Okay, so that's kind of, okay.
What we asked Jessica to do is simplify this a bit. I think we needed to go through this to be sure that we saw all the steps, but I don't think that's a bad thing either.
Yeah.
Because, but this would be more of a backup, and the summary page would give you a clearer picture.
Now, these scores down here in the, under C, when you bottom line it, at the, when we do the regional benefits, county, city, and school. The
Sure.
city,
They're higher because there's no pilot payment,
right, that's,
so that's how they get up to 13.
gotcha.
Unless there are further questions, Mr. Chairman, that's all I had, other than the consideration of the resolution to establish a date for the public hearing, but.
I do have one thing, it was not on the agenda, but it's just a review and approval of the bills to be paid.
Yes, okay.
The reason why those things were crossed out, QuickBooks has a weird quirk that if you do a journal entry that involves accounts payable, it keeps it in there, so I'm gonna go and reverse those out and put in the chargebacks for the invoices in a different manner. But if you look at them, you see they just wipe each other out. So it just makes this report messy short term. They will be gone by next meeting, so you can see that basically I've already put in the 12.5 for CEDC, assuming that that was approved. Did we vote on that? I don't think we did. I don't think we voted on that
I
or
thought we submitted, the contract was in the consent agenda.
we approved the contract. The finance committee approved it. Did the whole board approve
No.
it?
No, we just had a vote on it.
Right.
Right, both the
And
board, the whole board.
Same thing with the road and house shawl contract. I just don't think the total board has voted on either of those, and they probably should.
Yeah.
But let me just finish this. So anyway, I put the 12.5 in there for now. And then the remaining bills are all road and house shawl legal bills. So
And we have a breakout of that for the year that we'll give you by project. And I do think we do, Chris, we do have to discuss perhaps establishing the escrow sooner than, because you have build time to Crescent as an example, or you have book time, not build it. And if,
Did you build it?
and you know, what you said earlier, that at the time of the public hearing, we'd ask them to establish escrow. I think we have to look at that as a policy, but we, Heather, if you and I and Chris could talk about
Yep, that's fine.
when that happens.
So,
Need a motion and second to pay the bills?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
I do the other two agreements.
Sure.
CDC.
Oh,
I'm
CDC.
sure.
I think we did, Chris. We did hers earlier.
Oh.
And then we just missed the CDC contract.
Okay.
Can I get a motion and second to,
Motion.
Sorry.
all in favor?
I
And then finally, the public hearing resolution.
Mike, just as we consider this resolution, I'm not sure if that was your point, but I think we do need escrow now for purposes of moving forward once the application is accepted. I think you indicated that the application fee, your intention was that the IDA was going to essentially be responsible for or cover, you know, evaluation up to that point, but you know, as we're getting to the point of more specific, you know, project review, I think that it's appropriate to request the escrow at this point. It's up to the IDA. Obviously, the IDA can pay those out of their own fees, but, you know.
I was what you're saying now, but earlier you said that after the public hearing, they should put up escrow. So,
No, I don't think so.
what-
Nope.
Well, in any case.
In any case, I just think it's more administrative, convenient for us to have and should there be an escrow agreement? I have had one developer ask, you know, should there be a written agreement as to how that escrow works? But let's talk
So
about
the
that.
application document itself provides for that, but, you know, we can discuss that, Mike. I think in the meantime, I think the escrow is not going to us, it's going to the city, or I mean, excuse me, the IDA.
I think that the issue is if there's a written agreement, it's clearer than a paragraph in the agreement, in the application.
Okay,
But
Mike, we can consider that, but in the meantime, you need to have some escrow established for this project.
we understand that. That's why I wanted to clarify what I at least thought you said earlier.
Right, can I get a motion and a second accepting the application of Crescent Building redevelopment project?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Can I make a motion that we request escrow from Crescent?
Yes. Generally, we start with $5,000.
Yes,
And,
and then subject to replenishment, correct.
And that is used to pay for council time, for any outside independent consultants that are retained by the IDA. And you will get copies of, you know, bills that, so you can see how your money was spent.
So Mike, I just want to note that if the IDA is going to hire an independent consultant, I think those need to be, you know, priced separately because some of those are like $15,000. And so, you know, we're just going to be way over escrow if we don't, you know, get those estimates and establish that escrow up front rather than doing it after the fact.
Right. And we should do that at the time the board authorizes the contract, if we release an estimate of what that contract would be, because there's no one has authority to spend $15,000 without prior approval.
So in this case, for this particular project, you're going to have, you're going to use the internal CEDC analysis is what your plan is?
I think after the board reviews it, we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's what we used for SEC 7.
Mhm.
I think that, you know, the housing deviation was so significantly more than what we've seen with the two smaller projects. You know, the deviation is not the schedule of payments or the percentage. It's a total, it's a longer pilot, greater percentage. So I think that it made more sense to get an outside opinion on those projects, but that's up to the agency, and I think it will depend perhaps on what the comments are from the municipalities and from the public if anyone attends the public hearing.
Do we need a motion and a second for the escrow, or is that just an administrative thing that we
That's
just
an
request? Okay.
But thank
I have a motion on the table.
Motion and what? What?
We need a motion for the public hearing.
Do we need a motion for the public hearing?
Yes,
That's what's before you, the resolution.
I need a motion for the public hearing.
Make that motion? Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'll now open it up to public comment.
Is there a proposed date for that public hearing? We would have to pick the date, and we have, I think we have to notice it 10 days in advance or more. Lisa has those details. And you know, depending on what your schedule is, you know, we would want you to make a presentation, an initial presentation at the public hearing, so the public would have some idea of the scope of the project, but we'll coordinate that with you. The full board is generally at the public hearing, it's not required. So we also would have to coordinate with the schedule of the IDA members.
Where did this take place?
Here.
Any other public comment? It's for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.